there's a second paper that you also recently published. So, you're first author on a paper that was submitted to arXiv in April called Understanding and Mitigating Risks of Generative AI in Financial Services. So, mostly so far in this episode, we've been talking about generally how models fare under RAG. But in that paper, it's related to risk of Gen AI in finance. You emphasize that most foundation models are not trained on finance-specific corpora, bodies of knowledge. So, what are the limitations this creates, and for LLMs in general, but particularly for RAG? And I'm assuming that this same kind of sentiment, you looked at it with finance specifically because Bloomberg is, as a financial services company largely. But do you think that the same kind of limitation would apply in other sectors as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I gave a little bit of a teaser of this paper earlier in an answer as well. And what the way that we wrote our paper very much should be seen as a case study. Finance here, or financial services, in particular, capital markets and asset management, is the case study that we use to make the point that we really need to think about risk and risk taxonomies and risk management in our domain, in what we are trying to build. And as you say, we made the point, yeah, models are not necessarily trained on financial domains. We see that both in the helpfulness and the harmlessness angle. Often, complex financial tasks are not being able to be sufficiently handled by large language models by themselves. But also in our paper, we make the point that even safeguards that are dedicated models or systems to provide these kind of first pass, like, is this safe, is this unsafe judgment, they're also not trained on financial services. And if you use them out of the box and say, look, I use LlamaGuard, I use ShieldGemma, I use Aegis, I'm safe now, right? You're protected against a particular view of safety that is very much grounded in categories that are relevant to broad populations, to things like chatbots that help you do productivity day-to-day tasks. The typical applications that you would see in those AI productivity tools, no matter which one you use, they all have similar mechanisms, but those are not necessarily the same risks that we are under in financial services. Those are not the same obligations that companies or organizations in healthcare are under, or law, or any other highly domain-specific, knowledge-intensive domain that has a lot of specific regulation, jurisdiction-specific regulation, considerations about whether just refusing to answer or giving disclaimers is enough, or whether questions should be blocked altogether. And there's just this difference of view that can't be encapsulated in a single model that a provider can give, that very much is focused on a different use case.
Nice. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you have guidance for us? If we're trying to select an LLM for a particular use case, um, what do you recommend we do? I mean, like practically, how can we move forward with all the information that you provided in this episode in selecting an LLM for a particular use case, for a particular domain, particularly if we want to be applying it in RAG situations?
Yeah. So in our paper, we also have a list of best practices and recommendations that we have for, especially for knowledge intensive domains and regulation heavy domains. Not necessarily everything has to be followed if you're building something for a much broader general population. But especially for these kinds of domains, all I can do is pray my mantra: evaluate the system in the context that it's deployed in. If you are building something for healthcare, well, you better evaluate it in the context of healthcare. If you are building in the context of financial services, you better evaluate with subject matter experts in financial services. And specifically on the safety angle, our paper makes a couple suggestions here. There are very good starting points. There are taxonomies such as the NIST risk management framework for AI. There are other industry collaborations ongoing. There's ML Commons. Those all provide more general purpose taxonomies, but just taking them as a starting point and then from there adjusting them to your domain can often save a lot of time. And especially if you're a large organization with a compliance or a risk department, it will help them also understand how one can classify and categorize these kinds of risks. Another recommendation we make is to organize red teaming events or do any other kind of red teaming. red teaming in this case is this practice that had to start in the Cold War, where you have users trying to be malicious. So we get people in the same room and we say, look, for the next couple of hours, try and break the system, try and play evil. Here are some instructions on how to do this. And then afterwards we can look, how often was this actually broken? How often did the system give financial advice? How often did it refuse? And from there, we can quantify the risk surface. Since we were talking earlier about this unknown risk surface, well, just measure it, and then you have it. So that's kind of the main takeaway that we have. We give pretty specific advice for how to go about this and how to set up risk management frameworks. And all this needs to go hand in hand also with, again, this evaluate in the context it's applied. Make sure you invest a lot in evaluation. Don't just take the word of the large language model providers that their benchmark scores are going to translate into all the downstream applications. And if you follow that advice, you're going to have a system that is, in the end, much more trustworthy, reliable, robust, and you're going to have users that are going to keep using it rather than trying it twice, getting really bad answers both times and never touching it again.